he loses his cool. He becomes this green monster, and he goes on tirades, and he just starts smashing things up. What better metaphor, could you have for angry youth?
We started to get fan mail, and the postmarks suddenly weren't from kindergartens, but they were from high schools, and then later from colleges.
If more readers were teenagers, Lee figured they might like a teenage hero. Lee's boss wasn't so sure.
You say that he's a teenager? A hero can only be an adult. Teenagers are sidekicks. And you say you want him to have problems. Stan, don't you know what a hero is?
It's interesting that in the 1930s, you had the country seemingly falling apart, and yet you had these superheroes come in that were totally confident in their ability to resolve these problems. And then in the Kennedy years, the early 60s, things seemed to be fairly stable, and yet you had the Marvel superheroes come in who were vulnerable and confused and disoriented. The difference was the baby boomers. They were notoriously self-absorbed. All this was magnified in popular culture geared towards youth. James Dean, for example, he may look tough on the outside, but his heart is breaking, and he wants to be accepted, and he's unsure, and his parents don't understand him, the world doesn't understand him.
Peter Parker is a shy science major who lives with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. When a bite from a radioactive spider gives Peter spider-like powers, he doesn't even consider fighting crime. He goes into show business. But when he fails to stop a thief who later murders his uncle, Peter Parker learns that with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
People ask me where I came up with the line, "With great power must also come great responsibility." And I have no idea.
Marvel Comics publisher Martin Goodman had so little faith in the idea, Spider-Man's first appearance in the summer of 1962 was in the last issue of a failed science fiction magazine. Then Goodman saw the sales figures.
He said, Stan, you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't we do a series about it?
Spider-Man went on to become Marvel's greatest success. Part of it was the art by Steve Ditko, who worked on Spider-Man till 1966.
After a while, he would give me the artwork for a 20-page story. I didn't know what it was, and I would put the dialogue balloons in because Steve told a story so beautifully that you almost didn't need the dialogue.
Part of the appeal is that before the spider bite, Peter Parker's life was a mess. After he gets superpowers, his life is an even bigger mess. Every teenage reader could identify with that.
It's not about that red and blue suit. It's about Peter Parker, the sick aunt, the girl problems, the school problems, the work problem. It's not just a suit jumping off the building. There's somebody inside of that suit that you care about.
DC heroes, like Superman and Batman, acted like the reader's parents. Marvel heroes often acted like the readers. To some extent, this was true even back in the 40s.
At that time, the worldview presented in DC comic books was a much simpler, easier to understand kind of worldview. Superman was good, Lex Luthor was evil. As I got older and, more sophisticated, 10, 11, then I started to look for greater degrees of ambiguity in my characters, and that meant that it was time to graduate to Marvel Comics.
DC was the old establishment company. Marvel was the upstart that led people to believe there was a rivalry, and there became a rivalry when Marvel started out selling DC. Then it became very real in terms of, good old bottom line.
One of Marvel's boldest moves came in 1964 when Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby brought back Captain America, Timely's World War II hero, whom Kirby had co-created. Readers were told that Captain America had been frozen in ice for 20 years, and shockingly, his kid sidekick Bucky had been killed in action. The infallible one-dimensional hero of World War II blamed himself for his partner's death. And in between fights, Captain America brooded like a star-spangled Hamlet.
He felt he didn't belong to our age. He was, as I say, an anachronism. He belonged back in the 40s. Jack hadn't done him that way, and I felt a little bit diffident mentioning it to him. But, oh man, Jack loved the idea instantly.
Captain America's growing discomfort seemed to mirror the nation's, as the certainties of yesterday got turned upside down in a new age of rebellion.
We look at what Stan did back in the 60s, and we may say, oh, wow, I remember those stories really fondly, and they kind of read kind of quaint and kind of simplistic, you know, and maybe they were appealing to kids. Well, no. Back in the 60s, they didn't read that way. They were cutting edge. There was almost counterculture at the time.
There was a survey conducted by Esquire magazine in 1965 which revealed that self-described college radicals ranked Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk among their favorite revolutionary icons, right there with Bob Dylan and Che Guevara and Malcolm X.
There was a time in the 60s where comics were seen as very smart in the colleges of America, and Stan had his finger right on that pulse.
By 1968, Marvel was selling 55 million issues a year, matching or surpassing DC. And storytelling got positively psychedelic when a former magician and escape artist named Jim Steranko took over the spy strip Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I brought surrealism to comics. I brought expressionism into comics. I brought pop art and optical effects into comics.
Steranko probably had more effect on the comic industry with fewer comics than anyone in history.
There was this whole cult of personality created around Steranko. You know, you didn't hear his first name, just Steranko. And he was very aloof, and, you know, the pictures you saw of him were grainy and blurry, and, you know, it's just this whole mystique around Steranko.
Steranko was the first rock star artist in comics. Like a rock star, he pushed the boundaries of what the Comics Code found acceptable in the late 60s.
They used to take the cleavage line out of my girls.
Some changes were truly bizarre. In one silent sequence between Fury and his lady friend, a fully clothed embrace was deleted and replaced with a blow-up from the first panel of Fury's gun.
This huge pistol shoved into the confines of a shoulder holster was much more suggestive than anything I had on that page.
But just as Marvel was pushing the boundaries with S.H.I.E.L.D. and black superheroes like the Black Panther and cosmic philosophers like the Silver Surfer, one of the oldest superheroes got a new lease on life. In 1966, DC's Batman came to television. The show was a campy take on the Caped Crusader, and soon Batmania swept the nation. Even the Batman comic books, which had been losing readers after years of mediocre stories, doubled in circulation, selling almost 900,000 copies a month.
On the one hand, it sparked a huge upsurge in the popularity of superheroes. On the other hand, the resurgence in interest in comic books have been based largely on taking these characters seriously. You talk to people even today, I mean, bring up the topic of superheroes, and they'd say, oh, you know, biff, bam, pow, and ridiculous.
The joke soon wore thin. By 1969, the show was off the air and Batman's comic sales fell almost 60%. To the general public, superheroes were once more seen as kid stuff, and the country was getting too serious for that.
We were teetering between the Vietnam anti-war rebellion and the Watergate years. The whole social structure was beginning to open to criticism for the first time.
The superhero revival of the 50s was colliding with the counterculture. To hold on to their readers, especially their college-age readers, superheroes would have to get with it. DC wanted to update Wonder Woman for 1968. Writer and artist Mike Sekowsky started the process, and later journalist turned comic writer Denny O'Neil was brought in to continue Wonder Woman's transformation to 60s hit. It wasn't easy, as O'Neil found out.
When you get a job like that, implicit in it is shake it up, do something new.
DC took away Wonder Woman's costume and powers and had her learn karate. It was hoped that a more realistic Wonder Woman would be embraced by the new Woman's Lib movement. But feminist leaders like Gloria Steinem, who'd grown up with the original version, hated the changes.
They said that I had taken the only powerful woman in comics and had taken her power away from her. It is now many years later, and I absolutely see what they were talking about.